Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're digging into a real puzzle. You have two massive earthquakes hitting Taiwan just over a year apart, but the results, well, they were just shockingly different. One was absolute devastation, and the other, while powerful, was a whole different story. Okay, let's just jump right in. On one hand, you've got the Yilan quake in 2024, a magnitude 7.4. It left 19 people dead and more than 1,000 injured. Just widespread destruction. But then you have the Yilan quake of 2025, still a monster at magnitude 7.0, but look at this. No major injuries and really just minor disruptions.
You see what I mean? The magnitudes are so close, you'd think the damage would be pretty similar. But nope, not even close. So what in the world explains that huge difference in the outcome? Let's break it all down and really get to the bottom of this.
So first up, let's go back and really take a look at the scale of the Yilan disaster. I think this is going to set the stage for just how high the stakes really are when a powerful quake hits land.
The human cost was just heartbreaking. 19 people tragically lost their lives.
And the number of injured was just staggering, over 1,100 people.
And then you look at the economic toll. We're talking an estimated $2.5 billion in damage. Just immense.
And you know what's really telling here is how everything just cascaded. This quake, which was the strongest since the massive 1999 Gigi earthquake, didn't just cause a few problems here and there. It set off this chain reaction, over 700 landslides, major highways completely shut down, and power knocked out for hundreds of thousands of homes. It was a total shock to the entire system.
All right, so now let's fast forward to the Yilan event in late 2025. You've got another really powerful tremor, a 7.0, that shook the whole island. But as you're about to see, a very, very different story played out.
So even though the shaking was intense, the impact was mostly, well, minor. Yeah, public transport slowed down a bit, some companies evacuated their staff just to be safe, a few ceiling tiles fell at an airport, but power was back on super quickly. And here's the kicker, right? No major injuries and no collapsed buildings.
And this brings us right back to the big question. If it wasn't just about the magnitude, what was the game-changing factor? What spared Yilan from the kind of disaster that hit Yilan?
Well, the answer, as it turns out, lies deep, deep down below the surface. See, it's not just about how much power the quake had, but where that power was actually unleashed from.
The key idea we need to wrap our heads around is something called epicenter depth. The easiest way to think about it is like a sound. If someone shouts right next to your ear, it's deafening, right? But if they shout the same thing from a block away, it's way quieter. Earthquake waves work kind of the same way.
And here it is, laid out plain as day. The Yilan quake was pretty shallow, starting just 40 kilometers down. But the Yilan quake? It was almost twice as deep, starting at nearly 73 kilometers. And trust me, that extra distance, it makes all the difference. So here's the bottom line. By the time the waves from that deeper Yilan quake actually got to the surface, a huge chunk of their destructive energy was already gone. It had fizzled out. You could say that those extra 30-something kilometers of rock acted like a giant natural shock absorber. But you know, geology is only half the story. The difference between a little disruption and a full-blown disaster, that often comes down to us, to people. And in Taiwan, a deep-rooted culture of preparedness played a role that was just as important. Look, Taiwan sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, so it has this long, often painful history with earthquakes. Catastrophes like the 1999 Gigi earthquake were a brutal wake-up call. They forced the island to learn, to adapt, and to build one of the absolute best disaster response systems in the world. This quote right here gets to the heart of it. That Uranus building that collapsed so horribly in 2024, it was built before those strict new building codes came into play. It's a critical lesson. Modern engineering and thinking ahead with policy literally saves lives because the newer buildings held up so much better.
And this whole mindset, this focus on being prepared, it's not just for earthquakes anymore. It's become an all-hazards approach that's basically baked into the national culture, ready to go for any kind of disaster.
I mean, just look at how they handled Typhoon Fenghuang. This is that system in action. Warnings went out days early. Over 1 million people were evacuated before the storm even made landfall. The whole country was on alert, and the response was coordinated and already in place. It's all about being proactive to minimize the harm.
So, after all that, what does this tale of two very different quakes teach us? Not just about Taiwan, but about facing disasters anywhere.
I think the big takeaway is this. We can't stop the earthquakes. We can't stop the typhoons. But we can absolutely change what happens next. Understanding the science and then combining that with serious long-term preparation, that is what separates a tragedy from just a close call.
And that leaves us with one last, really powerful thought. Geology might deal the cards, but being prepared, that's a choice. And it's the one thing that we actually have control over that truly decides how resilient we are when nature shows its awesome power.